YouTube doesn't tell you when my new videos are out unless you click that notification button and you're subscribed, so be sure to do that. And please, click the like button, guys, to keep this channel growing. Thank you. One UK doctor who worked the night shift heard quite a chilling tale of something that happened there. Apparently, a doctor was seen talking to no one on a CCTV camera, only to later admit that he was giving directions to a woman that wasn't there. The night shift can be scary. You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best channel to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. If you work the night shift, that basically means you get to be in danger, while everyone else is in bed safe from the things that lurk at night. But what does lurk at night? Well, these allegedly true scary stories will show you. If you want to be in a future video, you can send me your stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. Now, get ready, because I'm about to give you even more reasons why you should probably call in tonight. Number 1. Ghosts in the CCTV blind spots. Submitted by Rorschach. I am a concierge for a residential building, and it's basically fancy flats for high-earning people. The concierges do a mixture of work on a rota-time basis from morning, evenings, and nights. We mainly just sit in the reception room, and being the first main form of contact, we write down and log any problems the tenants may have and send it to the right department. We also have to monitor the car park, as well as keys, fobs, and cards, and check who goes in or out of the building. Looking at the CCTV footage is also part of the job, and those of you who have worked alongside CCTV cameras, you know there are always blind spots. I mean, the camera can only capture a part of the room, and there will always be some angle where the camera cannot quite catch or reach. Some of the concierges who work on the night rota joke that they will sleep anywhere in the building where there is a blind spot for the CCTV camera. On the weekend night shifts, you get another concierge to help work alongside you, and on the weekdays you're alone in the nights. On the morning and evening shifts, you're mainly alone, but there is an hour crossover when one concierge has an hour left on his or her shift, and when another concierge has just started. These crossovers have been purposely put in at certain points of the day when the building is most busy. I'm the newest one out of all of the concierges, and I am on my second month. The managers are actually nice, and I don't feel scared asking for help when I need it. On my first night alone, it did give me the creeps at first, because the place is a large building. It's actually 3 buildings which are all interlinked. It does get cold and we have heaters, but even though it's on full blast, the temperature seems to always drop. I often heard things moving around the building, but I kept logically trying to pinpoint what it was. And I don't know, but I felt this great uneasiness all around me. I had never done night shifts before, and I was struggling at first. Eventually, I fell asleep for about an hour, but there was no one around to catch me. It was around that time that I heard this faint voice telling me to wake up. I shot up so fast. I began looking around, and I spotted right in the corner of my reception area what appeared to be a floating apparition that was just barely visible. What I did see was that it was smiling at me, like it didn't care about its existence being so terrifying to me. Heck, maybe that even made it happy. I instantly sobered up. That was replaced with fear and shock. And then I saw the apparition had a child in its arms. I tried looking at the CCTV camera, and it was in the blind spot where I couldn't see it, so if it was visible on camera, I wouldn't have been able to record it either. Meaning when I told anyone about this, they would think I was crazy. The temperature began to drop, and the entity continued to smile that sinister smile. Just before the thing disappeared, just fading away from existence, I thought I could see ice forming on the small baby in its arms. After that, I didn't even try to go to sleep again. When I went home that night, I jumped straight into bed, feeling safe enough to finish my sleep, but I was awoken by my phone ringing. It was my manager. She told me that one of the tenants' babies had passed away from hypothermia that night, and she asked me if I saw anything unusual or know anything about this. I told her no, and there was obviously nothing they could find on CCTV. A baby passing away in an apartment building from hypothermia, that's bizarre, I think. Then, on a different night shift, I found something else in the club room. That room was made so tenants can go somewhere to socialize and even have parties. I first heard lots of noises coming from the club room, but it just ended up being a homeless man. But as I was walking away, I saw it, another apparition standing in one of the blind spots in the cameras, this time directly below a camera, in the corner of the room. It seemed frozen and still, not staring at me, but watching the homeless man intently. Later on that week, when I read this in a newspaper, it gave me pause, and I wondered if it was the same homeless man. Because near our complex, they found a homeless man who had passed away in the night. It appeared to be from a mugging. These spirits seem to know what they're doing, and they purposely appear in areas where the CCTV cameras don't catch them. And when you consider that the cameras see the main parts of each room, it's a creepy realization, thinking that in every dark spot in a room you walk into, something might be watching. And better yet, you can't prove it to anyone, because the CCTV cameras don't see anything. Because of this, I'm still very much struggling to get used to the night shifts I work on, and every time I fall asleep or go to the office room to have some shut-eye, I always strangely end up in another part of the building. And creepy enough, I later noticed that the parts of the building I wake up in, they're blind spots from the CCTV cameras. I still work here, and I'm still part of the night shift. But now I'm determined to stay awake no matter what, and to look for a better, safer job. Number 2. The Field Stalker. Submitted by James. These events took place almost 20 years ago in Indiana, where I grew up. My father lived about an hour outside of Indianapolis in the middle of nowhere, and I would visit him over the weekends as a child. It was a nice, quiet town, and he lived on a large piece of land. Vast rolling fields stretched as far as my vision carried, with deep, lively forests encompassing them on nearly every side. Some of my best memories were spent hunting and working outside with my old man, breathing in the crisp country air that sat undisturbed by the hustle and bustle of the city. It would have been a perfect place if it had not been for the thing that inhabited the land. I still remember the first time I saw it. I was sick as a dog, and my father yelled out to me, "Put those chickens up, boy," before shutting the door and making his way to his job. Every night he had me work around the house and land, making sure everything was kept tidy and in place. It took me a couple of hours, but I usually enjoyed it, considered it my night shift, even though I was a kid. He had a few dozen chickens that he would use for his eggs, and the occasional family dinner. They were always a lot of fun to chase around and play with as a child. Well, about an hour after he left, I was able to force myself out of bed, my sinuses congested and head throbbing. I made my way out the back door. Night was beginning to fall as I rounded up all my little feathery friends into the coop, before closing and barring the door, checking their water and food. I glanced to my right at the enormous fields that stretched out of my sight, and I saw a storm roaring way off in the distance. With such a huge area providing an open sky, any storm within dozens of miles could be seen as flashes of lightning rang silent and illuminated the entire property with each flicker. I sat there, mesmerized by the beauty of the storm, before something caught my eye. It first appeared in a flash of lightning, a good distance away, but a few seconds later, it was much, much closer, and I made out a grotesque shape tearing through the fields parallel to me. It wore skin so pale that it glowed a faint blue in the moonlight, and its limbs were jagged, disproportionate to its body. One leg seemed longer than the other, and its arms were clenched against its body like a praying mantis. Long, wispy fingers hung down as it strode on through the blackness. I sat there in place as fear gripped me tightly. This thing was gaining distance so fast. With each sporadic interval of lightning, it seemed to gain hundreds of feet. It wasn't until a particularly long stretch of lightning strikes that I got a better look at it. It ran in a way that still pops up in my nightmares. Its body trembled and convulsed as it glided across the grass. Its longer leg made apparent as its sprint resembled more of a limp. But a limp that had to be speeding by at over 30, maybe 40 miles per hour. The one thing that stuck out more than any of this was the absolute silence. It was running by at an inhuman speed as its joints bent and twisted begrudgingly, but it never made one sound. Each step was completely devoid of any noise, and though it looked like its body hurt to move, it was as if it wasn't even there. With each flash of lightning, it gained an impossible amount of ground, and before I knew it, it was gone. It dissolved into the faraway tree line without any disturbance. I ran back inside, crying to my dad's girlfriend, and was probably babbling incoherently as she tried to calm me down. I spent the rest of my night on the couch in fear, watching sitcoms with my future stepmother. For the next several months, what was normally a trip that I looked forward to was one that stewed anxiety in my gut, as I dreaded possibly seeing that thing again in the night. But as I came and went dozens of times more, I hadn't encountered it, and I was beginning to wonder if it was just a strange trick of light, as I was extremely sick at the time of seeing it. Fast forward a few years, and I was just entering high school. My father's house was a great place to have gatherings with friends as we had bonfires, cookouts, football games, you name it. I had all but forgotten my experience, and my dad's home was once again a destination that I spent the entire week thinking about. Me and several friends, Wayne, Tim, Steve, and Matt, had planned a time to go out there. After waiting impatiently for a few weeks, the day finally came to go out, and I was excited to spend time with my friends and Dad. We packed up all the essentials and made the trip without a hiccup. Once we arrived, we proceeded to do all the reckless things a bunch of partially supervised 14-year-olds would do. And after wearing ourselves out a bit, we started up a campfire and chatted for a little while as the remainder of the day quickly passed. We talked about the typical things, sports, girls, etc. As the sun was beginning to set, we were putting out the fire. Tim and Matt were feeding grass and fruits to an old horse that someone was paying my father to have set up in an enclosed area on his property. It was a very old horse named Jack, and it pretty much just stood around all day as it was old and broken down. It would barely be able to shuffle up to us to accept our offerings of food. "Finish up playing with the horse, ladies," Wayne shouted at them as he shoveled dirt and ash under the fire with his boot. "It's time to get started." Wayne was talking about playing flashlight tag. He enjoyed it a lot more than all of us, and sometimes took it a little bit too seriously, but regardless, it was a good time. As we gathered up in the center of the yard, playing rock, paper, scissors to determine who would go first, I couldn't help but remember my time here, working each and every night to tend to the animals and land. And as my mind drifted back to that, it began to drift back to the thing I saw that night, but I quickly shook my head, shaking off the thought. Anyway, back to our game. The rules go, the first person who got caught would be the next one to be it. Pretty basic stuff. Tim ended up being the first person it. We watched him turn around and place his head in his arms as he leaned against a tree. Then he began to count to 60. Once his back was facing us, we all scattered aimlessly into the dark. Racing around the huge yard, I found a large pile of old logs and firewood that I thought was a great hiding place. I was always the guy who tried to find the best hiding spot and stay put, rather than periodically moving spots as the seeker made their patrols. I knew this area like the back of my hand, after living here for years and working here outside at night for years. So if anything, I figured I had a huge advantage. 58, 59, 60. I heard Tim yell out as I saw the bright glow of the flashlight pierce into the night. I sat there smiling, still as a statue, as Tim slowly paced around the yard, waving his flashlight in every direction. Peeking through the logs, I had to stop myself from chuckling as I thought there was no way I'd ever be found. I huddled up as tightly as I could and covered up any skin with all the loose shreds of clothing that hung off of me. Just as I was settled in, I nearly had a heart attack as the horse abruptly cried out and began stomping around only 10 feet behind me. The horse was normally so slow and quiet that I hadn't even noticed it standing in my vicinity before it lashed out. It surprised me so bad that I jumped and caused a few of the logs surrounding me to go tumbling down. I saw the beam of light from Tim's hand swing over to me quickly as he briskly walked towards my spot. I was crouched down under a bunch of wood, so I wasn't really in any place to make a run for it, so I just waited to be caught. "Gotcha, man," I heard Tim yell out, triumphantly. "Yeah, I didn't think anyone would get me here," I said back. He retorted with some juvenile trash talk, and I made my way to the back porch, glancing back at the horse who was trotting around the electric fence nervously. I sat on the porch and sarcastically shouted, "You guys got this," as well as, "Woo! Go guys, keep it up," as I waited, hoping I might get them to laugh and get caught, so I could get on with the next round. I heard the excited screams of those guys as they were caught, and the sounds of some attempting to move through the dark as subtly as possible, while giggling to themselves. They were the worst at this, yet I had got caught first, thanks to the horse. All this time, though, I couldn't help but look out at the horse, frequently, to see that it was moving around erratically still, whinnying and snorting, something I'd never seen it do before. My round being it went relatively quickly, as I knew the area well, and my friends even better. Matt was the first person I found, and he was lying face down on top of a red car while wearing all black. He thought he could blend in. "Hey dummy," I said as I shined the light over his body. His face slowly turned towards me as if to make sure I was actually talking to him. We laughed as he made his way to the porch. The rest of my round went quickly, and we sat around talking for a little bit before starting up again. Matt kind of started to complain that he didn't want to be it, and he started to pout. He could be a bit of a wimp sometimes, after the rest of us pressured him into it. A few minutes into the next round, I again nearly jumped out of my skin as the horse let out another outburst. Shortly after I heard Matt's voice ringing out, "Guys, can we stop, please? Seriously, I'm not kidding, please get out here." I heard Steve yell back, "Yeah, right." And Wayne yelled back, "Don't be such a wuss, Matt." But Matt replied, "Guys, I'm serious. Please, I'm not kidding, please just come out." After a few moments, I decided to come out, seeing that maybe he was a little spooked, being so far out from his comfort zone in the middle of the night. "What's up, dude?" I asked as I approached him. "I saw something. I don't know what, but I don't know, I just saw something weird," he explained to me as Wayne and Steve emerged as well. "What's up, man? Are you just trying to get out of being it?" Steve said. "Screw you." Matt spat back at him. All right, Wayne mediated and calmed the two down. "Guys, I saw something. It looked kind of like a person, but it was pale, and it didn't have any hair or clothes," Matt said as he started to gain his composure again. I felt my heart sink as I remembered that thing I saw running through the fields years before. "What are you talking about, dude?" Wayne asked, seeming to get a little bit nervous. It was right then that Steve spoke out. "Wait a minute, where's Tim?" We all looked in each direction to make a quick head count, and we all went into a small panic. "Tim!" I called out of instinct and began quickly walking around the yard as the rest followed suit. That old horse was all but sprinting around the perimeter of its enclosure as we frantically called out to our friend. "Come on, Tim!" We had split up and were running around at this point, trying to find Tim. "Where the heck is he?" I heard Wayne yell out in frustration as the minutes piled on. "What's happening?" I said to myself as I made my way around an old, worn-down shed towards the back of the property. Just then I heard the familiar voice of Tim. "Guys, I'm over here!" A huge wave of relief swept over me when I heard him. Yet, when I looked up, I didn't see Tim. I didn't see him anywhere. "Tim, where are you?" There was silence for about 10 seconds before the same phrase repeated itself. "Guys, I'm over here!" The voice seemed to come from every direction at once as I turned around over and over again in desperation. "Tim!" I yelled out one more time before I looked towards the tree line and something caught my eye maybe 50 feet away. My heart seemed to stop. A pale, disgusting figure stood out in the open just in front of the tree line. Its arms clenched tightly against its chest as its twisted body appeared to be barely able to keep standing. As I sat there frozen, I got a look at its face, and I saw that it had no eyes, no ears or nose, no hair anywhere, as it glowed that same faint shade of pale white blue in the moonlight. All that it showed was a huge mouth, bearing razor-sharp teeth that seemed to bend in a distorted smile. It opened its mouth. "Guys, I'm over here!" slithered out in Tim's voice. I fell down to the ground, horrified. It stood there facing me for what felt like hours before it turned and sprinted into the woods in a flash, like before, making absolutely no sound. Moments after breaking through the tree line, an ear-splitting shriek erupted into the night that sounded as if it had blood and tar sloshing around in its lungs. This snapped me out of my state, and I sprinted back to the house. The horse had all but lost its mind at that point. I soon found the others waiting by the porch, some on their phones while Wayne was talking to my dad about what happened. A search party was formed and persisted for over a week. These stories usually end with no one being harmed. But they never found Tim. I don't know exactly what happened to him, but I'm certain that that thing took him away from us. I often stay up at night, guiltily wondering about his final thoughts and going over all the ways we could have saved him or prevented this. I've never returned there as my father sold the property and moved on after the incident. To this day, I wonder if it was that thing that made that horrible shriek, or if it was my friend Tim living his last moments. Number 3. The Drone Keeps Following Me. Submitted by Ullahshy. I work in a residential building as one of the clerks, which basically means I'm mainly behind the reception desk, where I log down problems the tenants may have with their flats, along with handing out and looking after the keys. We also do some maintenance tasks from time to time, like reading electric and water meters and bypassing the water meters if need be. We also have to keep an eye out on security cameras and react appropriately to anything that's out of the ordinary. For a couple of weeks now, a lot of the tenants have been complaining about a drone flying over their flat, and obviously this was really bad, because some stranger was spying and following people around from his drone. And that just sounds creepy, stalking from a distance. Last week I got a call by one of the tenants about a drone flying over his flat, and I managed to go outside and spotted it for myself. I saw it flying to where its owner had lived. There were some houses next to the residential flat, and I followed the drone to its owner's place and knocked on the door and told him not to do it again. But just as I was walking away, threatening legal repercussions, he said something in passing that disturbed me. "Fine, I'm going to end myself anyway." Confused and a bit creeped out even more, I replied, "Just don't do it again," and walked away. I mean, how do you reply or react to something like that? I was walking back to the residential building when I saw the drone following me. Annoyed and not wanting to return to his building, I got back to work, even though the drone was just outside the building and would often come to the windows to peep inside. After I put down the reception phone, I could hear the drone inside the reception room floating around. It must have gotten in when someone opened the door. I called the police and told the police everything. They arrived and they were quite quick. They saw the drone almost immediately when I let them into the building. The drone flew over to the door and the police opened it, letting it out. Then they followed it down to the house where the drone eventually just decided to rest on the roof of the place. Once there, none of us could see it anymore. The police then broke down the drone owner's door. I was behind them, out of the way and continuing to watch the scene unfold. Once they got inside, I saw a shocked look on their expressions. The drone owner was lying there and had apparently put a hole in his head. When the police went on top of the roof, they were surprised to find that the drone was not there, even though we had just seen it. This was really strange. When did he decide to end it all? And how did we not hear it? I mean, we were just outside his house when the drone landed, so if he was still flying it and ended it just now, we would have heard it. The house was cleared, and the man's passing made it to the papers, but no one said anything about the drone part of the story. What's stranger is, maybe a week or two later, I began to get more reports of the drone following and watching people. I remember thinking after hearing that, there's no way, this must be a different person. But upon seeing the drone, it was the same drone as before. This was bizarre and creepy. Is it possible that the spirit of a stalker has possessed his drone? Or is this something else entirely? The story is easily one of the weirdest I've ever experienced. Number 4. Walmart McDonald's Haunting. Submitted by DHB. I've been working at a built-in McDonald's in a Walmart since July of 2008. I started on the bottom rung and eventually worked my way into management. Over the years, there have been stories floating around since the place opened in the spring of 2005 that this particular location was built on top of a graveyard, or what was once a graveyard. But to me, that sounded ridiculous, and I never believed it. The first 6 or so years I worked there, we were owned and operated by McDonald's operations division, McOpco, which we called it. As such, we were required to have a third shift during the Christmas season from Thanksgiving until after New Year's. Most of these overnight shifts were very slow with few orders, so all that was required for the majority of the shifts was just a manager and a crew person. I was asked to do an overnight shift, and it was just the manager and myself for the night. It was about 1:30 a.m. when I was at the grill and the manager was wiping down the pile of trays that had been left from the previous shift, when we both heard a commotion in the stockroom. I remember it pretty clearly. It sounded like yelling in a different language that none of us could understand. It certainly wasn't any languages that we were familiar with. Over time, after many of these experiences, we simply referred to it as the ghost. Over the years, there have been other incidents, and each one seems to creep us out even further, making our joke about the ghost something sinister. It isn't uncommon for our employees to see a dark shadow cross along the back of the store, moving towards the stockroom at night, as you're facing the grill from the front counter. Adding to the mystery are random and unexplained noises that people hear during the night shift while doing inventory. Some of it even sounds like music, while other people report ghostly screams and cries. There are also other events that we can't explain. For example, it isn't unusual for one of the registers to ring up an order and immediately serve it off on both the monitor in the back and to the front counter. To make things even creepier is that when the drawers are counted at the end of the shift, the drawer balance is exact, even though it should be short whatever the amount is for the particular item that was rung up. We have objects that have seemingly fallen from the racks we use for our holding trays and other small wares without reason. Reviewing the security footage shows these strange orbs of light that happen to be moving by when the items fell off the shelves. And then there have been times when I've been in the store by myself at 2 or 3 in the morning, doing the end-of-month inventory, when I'll get a cold shiver up my spine out of nowhere. Of course, the Walmart associates also have their own stories. One of our former employees who went to work for Walmart doing overnight maintenance, shortly after quitting in April 2015 when we were sold to an owner-operator, would report weird ghostly chants deep in the stockroom where the cleaning supplies are kept, as well as dark shadows. Other associates have confided in me weird encounters they have had with cold breath on their necks, or cold hands and fingers touching them. Sometimes inappropriately. Occasionally, an associate will not heed the stories of what happens here, and will occasionally taunt these entities, and oftentimes have things happen to them that can't be explained. One such associate was found passed out in an aisle in a far corner of the stockroom. Upon reviewing the security footage, it showed the associate appearing to struggle with an invisible object before falling straight to the floor, where they laid 20 minutes before being found. It really goes to show you that no matter how safe and secure a place can be, or how brightly lit it is, there are things lurking around the next corner that cannot be explained in ways that satisfy a sane individual. And number 5, Scary Hospital Story, submitted by Vincent. My mom has been a nurse in a hospital for more than 40 years now. Back in the day when she just started working in the 70s, something creepy happened at work. Well, a colleague of hers had an old lady pass away on her late night shift. Back then, that was normal, and in that situation, they would bring the passed person to the hospital mortuary, and then wait for a doctor to confirm it later on. But back then, nurses could also confirm that. In fact, on an off night, multiple patients could pass away in a single shift, so most nurses weren't shocked about it anymore. So they did what they had to do, and they brought the lady to the mortuary, sliding her into one of the drawers they put people in. But as the nurse walked away, she swore she heard slight humming coming from one of the drawers. Not expecting it to be anything, she opened the drawer, and the nurse was shocked to find the lady was still alive in there. Instead of a shocked reaction, the old lady in the drawer calmly asked if she was there to get her out of there. She hadn't passed away, but had been mistaken to have been, and she was severely demented, so she wasn't at all panicked or even slightly worried about being put in the mortuary. But maybe that was for the best, so that she never had to fully realize what almost happened. Because if she hadn't made a sound, she would have been locked in that drawer, and she definitely would have passed away during the night. Working the night shift is a necessary evil. Someone has to do it. Someone has to make sure that the trucks are driven at night and that everything gets stocked. And someone has to make sure that those truckers who do drive during the night get fed. There has to be someone in place watching over the security cameras to make sure no one and nothing gets inside. You'd think things would get less creepy if no one had to work the night shift, but without people's eyes watching to make sure nothing creepy gets in, things might just be even more horrifying. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to send me your creepy true stories at darknessprevails.org/submit. If you want to support this channel even further, you can download my app Spooked in the description, You can donate to my Patreon at patreon.com/darknessprevails. $1 a month gets your name in the credits. Or go to morbidmonsters.com and get Darkness Prevails merchandise. As usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from my previous full video about real alien encounters. Cade's Days says, I once visited an alien on the other side of a wall too. Ah, an immigration joke. You must be a man of culture as well, or should I say a man of a different culture. Harley Wood says, I was abducted once. It was out of this world. Go back to your room, Dad. Ek_0 says, I saw an alien in my mirror. How come you don't do the comments anymore, Darkness? That just tells me, Ek_0, that you don't watch the full videos. And shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. Cyril Zaya Hubblecat says, your videos are so lovely. That voice ought to swoon the aliens. Actually, Humblecat, my voice is the only thing scaring them away at the moment. And Ashley Dyer says, sometimes I don't mind being probed, but when I do, it's when it's done by aliens. Well, apparently they aren't doing it right then. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in for another Darkness Prevails episode. I hope you enjoyed. Here are the credits to my patrons who continue to donate and support this channel. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy.